Welcome back. It's Saturday morning, and we continue to pour some delicious beer talked right into your ear.
Welcome back to the Beer Show, folks. Vic McCarty here. Kristen St. Peter has stepped out of the studio. She'll be back here for the end of her show. We'll go over our taste test that we did this week, that we do every week, and talk about some of the beers we liked and maybe some that we just didn't think were all that great. Sometimes, as we know, I'm a little pedestrian with my taste. I get stuck in a certain type, and that's what I stick with. And right now, I'm an IPA guy. It used to be I was more porter and stout, but anyway. You can find us on Facebook, Bob's Big Beer Show, and also we stream the show live, 1045bobfm.com. On the phone with us now, the head brewer at Jolly Pumpkin in the Traverse City area, Mike Wooster. Mike, good morning to you. How are you this morning?
I am well. Good morning to you, Vic. How are you?
Not too bad. Let's talk a little bit about your background. You're one of these young punks, and I say that with all the respect in the world, but when did you get into beer, and when did that start making sense to you to start brewing beer?
Right, yeah, well, I appreciate that. About a decade ago, I started home brewing, and at the time I was a cook for my profession, and the act of home brewing, I really enjoyed a lot. There's a little slower pace, a little more involved, and so I really kind of fell in love with it at that point. And it was within that first kind of year that I was like, man, I really want to do this as a profession. So, and at that time I was actually working in a winery, so I was already somewhat exposed to the beverage industry. And I was doing that part-time, and, the winery was fun, but I wasn't really passionate about wine in particular. So it was about 8 years ago that I met Russell, who was in the process of opening Right Brain. And we got along pretty well. I started working for him, assisting in the back when I could. And so that was kind of the progression there. And then in 2009, I started my job out here at Jolly Pumpkin and was able to work through the ranks and make my way up to head brewer, which is where I find myself.
I've heard the phrase, and early on when I started really getting into the craft beer industry and following it and tasting it, I heard the phrase beer as food. Are you from that school of thought that this is really just liquid food or liquid bread?
I would say I am from that school of thought. I think my natural progression, just enjoying things that involve your palate a little more, particularly from the food side. I would say that I am from that school of thought, but also I respect beer as being its own thing aside from food because, there are even more possibilities than what you have with a lot of food. So, it is definitely, they do definitely go hand in hand, I believe.
I've told the story on the show before, and I'll just recap it quickly, but I met Matt Therian, who has Lake Ann Brewing, probably now about 8-9 years ago, and we went next door to a party, and he had brought some beer that he had made, and at the time I thought, well, what do you mean? You made what? You're brewing beer at home? I don't want to try this. Right. And then I did, and I was like, whoa, this is really good stuff. When you started to brew, because that was 10 years ago, and that was before what I think of as the revolution here in the Traverse City area. But when you started to brew, how good were you, and what did you make early on?
Early on, not very good. Early on, I would say I was a little more from that beer as food kind of thought, and so I was doing some experimenting early on, I guess, in a way, trying to reinvent the wheel or kind of trying to find my own way and how could I make my own. And so, I had some missteps, but I also had some beers that turned out pretty good. My favorite beer to brew when I was a home brewer was an oatmeal stout, particularly for this time of year. And so those ones would always turn out really good. I've had some good ones, but I would say mostly early on, before being a professional home brewer. I had a few failures, and I'm not afraid to admit that. We learn from everything.
What was your first beer that you made at home?
First beer I made at home was an amber, and it was an extract kit, which is something that you can buy from a homebrew store like Diversions. And basically, what it is, it's concentrated wort. It's like syrup that is maltose, and it has its color and everything, and you just kind of mix it into your water, and it takes an extra step out of brewing. So, and that's a good place to start for a home brewer, because it kind of gets you just the idea of what it entails, and then kind of gradually moving from there to getting into using your own grains and things like that. That was the progression I took.
I've also heard that extracts are for sissies. Do you believe in that?
I don't speak absolute about anything, or at least I try not to. I guess I shouldn't say that I don't, because I'm sure I do. But extracts, it's a simple way for a home brewer to get started if you're talking about malt extracts. Flavor extracts and beers, not my particular, because you can even do an all-grain recipe and add some sort of extract flavor. That's not my particular cup of tea, because I feel that, you get just better, bolder flavors when you use raw ingredients. And, and that's kind of part of how I messed up early on in home brewing was not going about extracting those flavors the right way. But if you kind of, trial and error, you kind of figure out, well, where's the best place to add this flavor to where you're going to get the best result. So, and a way to get around that is just to use some sort of high flavor extract, and that's just not something I do.
Mike Wooster on the phone with us, head brewer at Jolly Pumpkin in the Traverse City area. Would you drink that first home brew that you made? Would you drink that now?
If it had still been sitting in a bottle, if I were to do it again today, I would, at least to try it. I mean, just to see it. And the funny thing is, I feel like about a year ago, I did come across a bottle of that very first homebrew, and I did open it to check it out, and it was terrible. But and I didn't drink it, but it was interesting to just see what had happened over all that time, because at that point it was still like 8 years old.
Yeah. The Stout Challenge is coming up on the 29th of this month. This is going to be going on over there at Little Fleet. There are going to be several breweries in the area competing. What will you guys bring to the table?
Well, without giving away too much, we're going to bring a stout that it's kind of funny how we stumbled across it. It's going to be kind of a flavored stout, and we came up with this flavor combination that makes a completely different flavor. And it's really it's strange how it came together to do this, but we're really excited about it and really hope that people like it. And we have a feeling that it's so unique that it might possibly win.
Where are you personally and professionally on the whole nitro idea? This is gaining more and more speed within the industry. Folks are putting at least one nitro-infused beer on tap. Where are you on that?
I've enjoyed nitrogen beers that I've had that aren't stout. I think it's an interesting, different approach to some styles. Like I've had a nitrogen IPA that I really like.
Interesting. Okay.
Nitrogen stouts, personally, not my favorite. I always, if I have an option, the same beers either on nitrogen or CO2, I always go for the CO2 just because I like the way that beer drinks.
Right.
I understand the fuller flavor of nitrogen and everything and how that works, but personally, I just like CO2 as my beer.
Talking to Mike Wooster this morning on Bob's Big Beer Show. Remember to find us on Facebook, and we stream live 1045bobfm.com. When you put in a long day and you're tired and you want to go home and relax, what do you pull out of your fridge? What do you like to? What's your go-to?
Well, typically in my fridge, I try to keep beers that I can't have regularly in the market. So if I travel, I try to get a case of something from different breweries, or even if I'm going downstate, I'll try to get a couple 6-packs of, brewers that aren't distributed in our area.
Right.
So most recently, I've liked New Glarus Spotted Cow because it's just an easy drinking beer. Particularly, this time of year it's getting pretty cold, so I'm kind of trying to drink it before it goes bad.
Right.
Typically I like a stout or something. An oatmeal stout this time of year is probably my favorite beer, but I'm kind of trying to get rid of those that are sitting around. So I've been drinking some Three Floyds lately. That New Glarus, like I said, and other than that, I've been kind of taking home some of our beer from here that we make.
Where are you on barrel-aged stuff and get that bourbon or that liquor flavor in a beer? Because I tell you what, I just can't seem to get my head around that.
It's I think it has its place. We are actually starting to get into some of that because we also do our spirits out here. So we have bourbon barrels that we are creating on our own. So it just seems like it'd be obvious that we could be able to do that. So we're getting into it. Like I said, I think it has its place, but it's also not one of those. I wouldn't probably want to buy a 6-pack or a growler of a bourbon aged beer, but be putting, into a session, with a couple other beers, I think they can be pretty enjoyable. They can come off a little overbearing at times, so that's kind of what I want to stay away from. But, overall, barrel-aged beer, I have a deep appreciation for, particularly the barrel-aged beer that comes from Jolly Pumpkin, which, we're a part of. But it's all different approaches, so.
Right now, on tap at Jolly Pumpkin, what's your highest octane?
Our highest octane is probably our Imperial Bowery Brown. It's 8.6 brown ale, kind of a winter warmer. It has that warmth from the high alcohol content, and it has some kind of nutty undertones. So it's a really drinkable beer for this time of year because it does kind of warm you up a little bit, and the flavors just kind of complement the season. So.
When are you smart beer guys going to make a beer that's high octane and very low calorie? When are we going to crack that technology?
Probably soon.
All right.
I feel like you get new things that come around all the time in this industry, particularly with so many players, that I don't doubt that could happen.
And I say that sort of tongue in cheek, but that's just one of the things. I'm trying not to get old and fat. I know I'm going to get old. I just don't want to get fat too. So I try to watch how many of the craft beers I have, and that's kind of hard because I know I'm just packing on the calories. All right. I read a recent publication, an industry publication, talking about predictions for 2016, and it would appear that the experts believe that the sky is still the limit in the industry. Do you agree with that?
I do. Actually, I was just watching, it was a little bit of a documentary about Brooklyn Brewing in Brooklyn, New York, and Garrett Oliver, who was kind of one of my early on heroes because he was kind of the beginning of that beer as food movement, or at least part of it. He said he doesn't feel like there's any kind of saturation point because it's really more of a return to normalcy before Prohibition. Because before Prohibition, there were many, many local pubs, kind of the way that we're starting to have now, more than you would actually think. And they were all sustainable, and it was, because the market was there, that was how people drank beer.
Right.
And after Prohibition, it was just the big guys that came through and were able to supply. But now it's kind of coming back to more of that local level. And when more customers come around, it's the more and more customers come around, the more and more breweries we can have locally.
Mike Wooster, Jolly Pumpkin, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Hey, thank you very much.
Settle in. Bob's Big Beer Show will be right back here on 104.5 Bob FM.